Admiral Kim Hyun-woo felt the familiar vibration of the hyperspace engines beneath his boots as he stood on the bridge of humanity's most powerful warship. The UES Thunderstrike had been his home for the past 5 years, and every scratch on its hull told a story of battles fought in the deepest corners of space, where no other species dared to venture. The bridge buzzed with quiet activity as his crew prepared for the most important mission in human history. Through the massive viewport, swirling blue and white energy danced like cosmic lightning, marking their passage through the dimensional fold that allowed faster-than-light travel. But this wasn't just any journey. They were heading to meet the Galactic Council for the first time. "Admiral, we're 30 seconds from drop point," Lieutenant Park So-young called out from her station. Her fingers moved across the holographic navigation display with practiced precision, each movement calculating their exact position in space. She was young, barely 28, but had already survived more space battles than most alien warriors saw in a lifetime. Hyun-woo walked closer to the viewport, his reflection showing a man who had seen too much. Grey streaks ran through his black hair and deep lines marked his face from years of making life-and-death decisions. His uniform bore the insignia of the Shadow Wars, a black star surrounded by silver flames representing humanity's victory over the darkness that had threatened to consume everything. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple energy signatures ahead," reported Chief Sensor Officer Kim Dong-woo from his console. "Looks like the entire Galactic Council fleet is waiting for us." Commander Lee Tae-min adjusted his communication headset and turned toward the Admiral. "All channels are open, sir. The Council has been broadcasting greeting protocols for the past hour. They seem eager to meet us." Hyun-woo almost smiled at that. If only they knew what humanity had been doing while they played politics and fought their small territorial wars. For 300 years, Earth had maintained complete radio silence, letting the galaxy believe they were still a primitive species barely capable of spaceflight. The truth was far more complex. "Admiral, should I power up the defensive systems?" asked Weapons Officer Sergeant Major Kim Bo-ram. Her station controlled enough firepower to level an entire planet, but she kept her voice calm and professional. "Some of these alien fleets are positioning themselves in what could be attack formations." "Not yet, Sergeant Major," Hyun-woo replied. "Let's see how they react to our arrival first." The hyperspace tunnel began to collapse around them as the Idiot's Thunderstrike prepared to return to normal space. Hyun-woo had made this transition thousands of times, but today felt different. Today, humanity would finally reveal itself to the galaxy, not as the weak, isolated species the aliens believed them to be, but as the guardians who had been protecting everyone from threats beyond imagination. "Drop us out of hyperspace," he commanded. Reality snapped back into focus as the Thunderstrike materialized in the Nexus system, home to the Galactic Council's primary meeting station. The massive human warship appeared like a ghost made solid, its presence immediately dominating the space around it. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, born from centuries of desperate warfare against enemies that defied natural law. Its hull was midnight black, designed to absorb energy weapons and blend with the darkness of space. Scars from plasma burns and impact craters marked its surface, each one a testament to battles fought against creatures that could devour entire star systems. 3 kilometers from nose to tail, the Thunderstrike dwarfed every other vessel in the system. Its design was purely functional, with no consideration for aesthetics. Weapon batteries lined its hull like the spines of some deep-sea creature, while sensor arrays extended like metallic antennae, constantly scanning for threats that other species couldn't even detect. On the bridge of the Krellian flagship Prosperity, Commander Vextar watched his sensor displays with growing alarm. The Krellians were one of the galaxy's most advanced species, their technology refined over millennia of peaceful development. But the readings from the human ship made no sense. "Commander, the energy output from that vessel is impossible," his chief scientist reported, her voice tight with disbelief. "Their reactor core is generating more power than our entire homeworld's energy grid." Vextar's breathing sacs deflated as he stared at the massive warship. The Krellians had always prided themselves on their scientific achievements, but this single human vessel operated on principles that seemed to mock everything they thought. They knew about physics, aboard the Zephyrian command ship Eternal Wisdom. Captain Theiss examined the tactical data with her 4 eyes, each one analyzing different aspects of the human vessel. The Zephyrians were the galaxy's acknowledged masters of military technology, their weapons and shields considered the finest in known space. But this human ship carried weapons that didn't appear in any of their databases. "Captain, I'm detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist," her weapons officer reported. "Their main cannons are channeling power through what appears to be folded space." Theiss felt a chill run through her silvery skin. The Zephyrians had spent centuries perfecting their military doctrine, but they had never encountered anything like this. The human ship wasn't just powerful, it was operating on technological principles that seemed almost magical. In the depths of space, the Vorthak warfleet maintained a hostile formation, their blood-red hulls gleaming under the system's twin suns. General Korath commanded from his flagship, his reptilian features twisted into their usual expression of contempt. The Vorthak were warriors born and bred, their entire culture built around conquest and military might. "Sir, the human vessel is large," his tactical officer reported nervously. "Size means nothing," Korath snarled, his fangs gleaming. "We've conquered species with ships twice that size. Humans are primitives who barely learn to fly between stars. They'll learn to respect Vorthak's superiority." But even as he spoke, Korath felt a strange unease. There was something about the human ship that didn't fit their intelligence reports. It moved with the precision of a predator, and its weapon systems tracked targets with mechanical efficiency that suggested extensive combat experience. On the Thunderstrike, Admiral Hyun-woo watched the alien fleets arrange themselves in what they probably thought were intimidating formations. If they only knew that humanity had faced enemies that could consume entire fleets in minutes, they might show more respect. "Admiral, we're receiving communications from 12 different species," Commander Lee Tae-min reported. "Most are standard diplomatic protocols, but the Vorthak are demanding we submit to inspection. And the others? The Altarians are offering peaceful welcome. The Zephyrians want to discuss technology exchange. The Krellians are requesting permission to scan our vessel for scientific purposes." Hyun-woo nodded. This was exactly what Earth's intelligence services had predicted. The galaxy was divided into various factions, each with their own agenda. But they all shared one thing in common. They had no idea what humanity had become during their long isolation. "Open a channel to all vessels," he ordered. The main screen activated, showing the faces of representatives from dozens of alien species. Some were humanoid, others so alien that human minds struggled to comprehend their forms, but all of them shared the same expression of curiosity mixed with wariness. "I am Admiral Kim Hyun-woo of the United Earth Navy," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battles that would have terrified these aliens. "We come seeking formal recognition and membership in the Galactic Council." A ripple of what might have been laughter came from the Vorthak channel. General Korath leaned forward, his scarred face filling the screen. "Humans, we know of your pathetic little world. You've been quarantined for good reason. What makes you think primitives like you deserve to join civilized species?" Several other alien representatives nodded in agreement. To them, humanity was just another primitive species that had recently discovered space travel. They had no idea that human ships had been fighting wars in the spaces between galaxies, while their civilizations built pretty cities and held diplomatic meetings. Admiral Hyun-woo's expression remained perfectly calm. Behind him, his crew continued their duties with the quiet efficiency of veterans who had seen the worst the universe could offer and survived. They had faced creatures of living darkness, beings that could manipulate reality itself, and enemies that existed partially outside normal space-time. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we should demonstrate what humanity has learned during our isolation." The alien representatives exchanged glances, most of them interpreting his words as empty boasting. But a few of the more perceptive ones noticed something in his tone, a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from experience with forces beyond their comprehension. In the depths of space, the Thunderstrike waited silently, its weapons, systems humming with barely contained energy. Around it, the alien fleets prepared for what they assumed would be a brief demonstration of primitive human technology. They had no idea they were about to witness the power of a species that had been forged in the fires of an invisible war, shaped by battles against enemies that existed in the nightmares of reality itself. The demonstration was about to begin. General. Korath's massive form filled the command chair aboard his flagship, the Bloodfang. His reptilian features were twisted into a permanent scowl, and battle scars covered his dark green scales like badges of honor. He had conquered 17 star systems for the Vorthak Empire, and his fleet had never met an enemy they couldn't crush. Look at that pathetic excuse for a warship, he growled to his bridge crew, pointing at the human vessel on the main display. 300 years of isolation, and this is what they built. It looks like a flying scrap heap. His tactical officer, a younger Vorthak named Grex, studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. Sir, the energy signatures are unusual. Their power core is generating readings that don't match any known technology. Korath slammed his clawed fist on the armrest. Primitive aliens always have strange energy sources, probably some unstable reactor that will explode if we look at it wrong. Signal the fleet. We're going to give these humans a lesson in real warfare. The Vorthak war fleet was a sight that had terrified countless worlds. 50 vessels arranged, in perfect attack formation, their blood-red hulls gleaming under the twin suns of the Nexus system. Each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering, armed with plasma cannons that could melt through asteroid belts and shields that had withstood the combined firepower of entire planetary defense systems. On the bridge of the Thunderstrike, Lieutenant Park So-young watched the alien fleet's movements with professional interest. Her console displayed tactical information that would have shocked the aliens if they could see it. Complete breakdowns of every Vorthak ship's capabilities, weaknesses, and crew complements. Admiral, the Vorthak fleet is moving into attack. Position, she reported, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. 50 vessels ranging from heavy cruisers to dreadnought class. They're charging weapons and raising shields. Around the bridge, the human crew continued their duties with calm efficiency. These men and women had faced enemies that could manipulate reality itself, creatures that existed partially in dimensions beyond normal space. A fleet of conventional alien warships, no matter how large, was almost routine compared to what they had survived. Chief Weapons Officer Kim Bo-Ram stood at her station, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her fingers moved across holographic controls that managed weapon systems beyond the comprehension of galactic science. She had been fighting the Shadow Wars for 15 years, and her expertise with humanity's most advanced weapons was unmatched. Sir, they're powering up plasma cannons, she reported. Standard galactic military technology. Their shields are quantum phase generators, probably 3rd or 4th generation. Admiral Hyun-woo nodded slowly. He had hoped this demonstration wouldn't be necessary, but the Vorthak had chosen to make it inevitable. Are our shadow killers online? All weapon systems fully charged and ready, Bo-Ram replied with a grim smile. These weapons were designed to punch through armor that could absorb entire star systems. Shall I show them what real firepower looks like? Just one ship, Hyun-woo said quietly. Make it clean and precise. We're not here to commit genocide. On the Vorthak flagship, General Korath watched his fleet surround the lone human vessel, like predators circling wounded prey. The sight filled him with satisfaction. Soon the galaxy would see what happened to species that dared to challenge Vorthak's superiority. All ships prepare to fire, he commanded. Target their engines first. We'll disable them and then board their vessel. I want to see what passes for technology among these primitives. But before he could give the order to attack, something on his sensor display made him pause. The human ship was moving, not away from his fleet, but adjusting its position with mechanical precision. Its main weapon was rotating, tracking movement with an accuracy that seemed impossible. Sir, their targeting system has locked onto the Razor Wind, his sensor operator reported nervously. How did they achieve weapon lock so quickly? Impossible, Korath snarled. The Razor Wind is using full electronic countermeasures. No. Primitive targeting system could penetrate our jamming. On the human warship, Chief Bo-Ram had selected her target with careful consideration. The Razor Wind was a heavy cruiser positioned at the edge of the Vorthak formation, close enough to demonstrate human capabilities, but far enough from the flagship to avoid accidentally killing their leader. Target acquired, she announced. Shadow Killer main battery locked and ready. The weapon that swiveled toward the Vorthak vessel was unlike anything in the galactic arsenal. It had been designed to fight enemies that existed partially outside normal physics, creatures that could absorb conventional energy and turn it against their attackers. The Shadow Killers channeled power through folded space-time, creating beams of pure destruction that could punch through barriers that shouldn't exist. Fire, Admiral Hyunwoo commanded. The main cannon of the Thunder Strike discharged with a sound that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself. A beam of brilliant white energy lanced across the void, moving faster than light through dimensions that existed between normal space. It struck the Vorthak heavy cruiser Razor Wind exactly amidships, where the ship's power core was located. The alien vessel didn't explode in the conventional sense. It simply ceased to exist. One moment. A fully functional warship with 400 crew members was floating in space. The next moment there was nothing. Not debris, not radiation, not even the electromagnetic signature that remained after normal weapon impacts. The Razor Wind had been completely removed from reality. Complete silence filled the communication channels. On bridges across the gathered fleets, alien officers stared at empty space where a massive warship had been just seconds before. General Korath felt his breathing stop as he stared at the tactical display. The Razor Wind had been one of his most powerful vessels, equipped with the finest shields and armor that Vorthak technology could provide. It had survived battles against entire planetary defense systems, and now it was simply gone, erased from existence by a single shot from the human vessel. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Our shields, our armor, how did they—" Admiral Hyunwoo's voice cut through the shocked silence, broadcast on all frequencies, so every ship in the system could hear him clearly. "Your shields and armor are designed for your level of warfare. For 3 centuries, humanity has been fighting something far worse than anything you can imagine." On the Krellian flagship, Commander Vextar watched his sensor readings with growing horror. His scientific instruments were designed to analyze any form of energy or matter in the known universe, but the readings from the human weapon made no sense. "Commander, the energy discharge contained more power than our entire planetary defense grid," his chief scientist reported, her voice shaking. But it wasn't just the power level. The beam existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I've never seen technology like this." The Zephyrian captain, Thais, pulled up tactical analysis with all 4 of her eyes, each one focusing on different aspects of what she had just witnessed. The Zephyrians prided themselves on having the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, but this single human weapon had just rewritten everything they thought they knew about warfare. Their targeting systems achieved perfect lock at maximum range in under 2 seconds, she reported to her bridge crew. "Even our quantum computers require at least 30 seconds to penetrate standard electronic countermeasures. This is impossible." Commander Lee Taemin opened communication channels to all Council vessels, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived battles that would have destroyed entire civilizations. "This is the UES Thunderstrike. Any hostile action will be met with overwhelming force. We didn't come here to fight you. We came to protect you." The words hung in space like a challenge and a promise combined. Around the human vessel, 50 Vorthak warships remained frozen in their attack formation, their crews too shocked to move. The other Council fleets maintained their positions at a safe distance, but their earlier confidence had evaporated completely. General Korath stared at the empty space where his ship had been, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. The Vorthak were warriors. They understood death in battle, ships destroyed by superior firepower, crews lost to enemy action. But this was different. The Razor Wind hadn't been destroyed. It had been erased, removed from reality so completely that it might never have existed at all. Slowly, with movements that seemed to require enormous effort, he reached for his weapon controls. His clawed fingers hovered over the firing mechanisms that could unleash enough firepower to level a city. But for the first time in his military career, General Korath hesitated. "Sir, what are your orders?" his tactical officer asked nervously. Korath looked at the human vessel on his display. its black hull scarred by battles, he was beginning to realize he couldn't imagine. Whatever these humans had been fighting during their isolation, it had forced them to develop weapons that made galactic military technology look like children's toys. One by one he began powering down his weapons. Around him, the rest of the Vorthak fleet followed his example, their crews too stunned to do anything but obey. From the council chambers on, the nearby diplomatic station, High Chancellor Mordek's voice came through on the emergency channel. The Altarian leader's crystalline features were flickering with what could only be described as terror. "Humans," he said, his voice trembling with implications he was only beginning to understand. "What are you?" The question echoed through space, carried by communication systems across dozens of alien fleets. What were these humans who could erase warships from existence with casual precision? What had they been fighting during their centuries of isolation that had forced them to develop such terrifying capabilities? And most importantly, if they had been protecting the galaxy from something worse than themselves, what kind of nightmares lurked in the darkness beyond the stars? The transport beam deposited Admiral Hyunwoo and his team directly onto the polished floor of the Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Chamber. The massive circular room stretched upward like a cathedral, its walls lined with viewing galleries, where representatives from hundreds of worlds watched in stunned silence. At the center, a raised platform held the primary council seats, each one designed for a different alien species. Hyunwoo walked forward with measured steps, his military, bearing commanding attention from every being in the chamber. Behind him, his senior staff spread out in a precise formation that spoke of years of experience working together under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. The aliens stared at the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. After witnessing the casual destruction of a Vorthak warship, they finally understood that these weren't the primitive beings they had dismissed for centuries. These were soldiers, veterans of wars that the galaxy had never even known existed. Lieutenant Colonel Choi Min-ho stepped forward, his intelligence officer's uniform bearing decorations that would have been meaningless to the aliens if they had known what battles they represented. He activated a portable holographic projector, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a three-dimensional map of their galaxy. But this wasn't the peaceful, orderly galaxy that the council members thought they knew. Dark shapes moved along the outer rim, creeping between star systems like predators stalking prey. The shapes were wrong somehow. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, their forms shifting and changing in ways that hurt to look at directly. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of the council," Admiral Hyunwoo began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "For the past 300 years, humanity has been fighting a war that you never knew existed. We call our enemies the Shadows, entities from beyond our galaxy that consume everything in their path." The holographic display zoomed in on one of the dark shapes, revealing something that defied easy description. It was part machine, part living creature, and part something else entirely. Its hull seemed to be made of crystallized darkness, and energy patterns flowed across its surface like veins of corrupted starlight. Captain Jang Dajun moved to stand beside the hologram, her xenobiology expertise evident in every gesture as she pointed to different aspects of the creature. She had spent 15 years studying shadow biology, trying to understand enemies that shouldn't exist according to any known laws of science. "These aren't just alien invaders," she explained, her voice steady despite the horror of what she was describing. "They're something far worse. They adapt to any weapon, any strategy, any defense we throw at them. Conventional warfare is completely useless against them because they don't just destroy. They consume the very essence of matter itself." The display shifted to show a shadow attack in progress. The alien representatives watched in growing horror as the creatures descended on a star system, their forms expanding and contracting like living black holes. Planets simply disappeared, not exploded or shattered, but absorbed into the shadow mass as if they had never existed. High Chancellor Mordek of the Altarian Union leaned forward in his crystalline chair, his usually calm demeanor cracking under the weight of what he was seeing. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Why didn't you warn us? Why fight this war alone?" Major Yang Soo-jin, Earth's strategic operations chief, had been waiting for this question. Her uniform bore the scars of battles fought in the spaces between dimensions, and her eyes held the haunted look of someone who had seen civilizations die. Because any contact with galactic civilization would have drawn them here sooner, she replied, her voice carrying the weight of difficult decisions made in humanity's darkest hours. The shadows hunt by following communication signals, energy signatures, anything that indicates advanced life. Your subspace communications, your trade routes, your very existence would have been like a beacon calling them to feast. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Every alien present suddenly realized that their peaceful civilizations, their trade networks, their constant communications across the galaxy, all of it would have been like ringing a dinner bell for creatures that fed on the essence of life itself. Commander Oyon Wu stepped forward, his engineering background evident in the way he gestured toward the holographic displays. He had spent 20 years developing weapons that could fight enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. We had to develop entirely new principles of warfare, he explained, calling up displays of human weapons that looked more like works of art than instruments of destruction. Conventional physics weren't enough. We learned to fight chaos with controlled chaos, darkness with controlled light. The weapons shown in the hologram were clearly beyond anything the galactic species had ever imagined. Energy flowed through crystalline matrices that seemed to bend space-time itself, and firing chambers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously channeled power from sources that defied understanding. General Korath, the Vorthak warrior, who had been so confident just hours earlier, found his voice with difficulty. "How many of these shadows did you face?" Admiral Hyunwoo's expression grew even more grim. 17 major incursions over 3 centuries. Each wave was larger than the last, and each one taught us new lessons about the nature of our enemies. The final battle lasted 3 years and cost us 40% of our entire fleet. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. 40% losses would have been catastrophic for any galactic military force, but these humans spoke of it as simply the price of victory, and their fleet was powerful enough to erase warships from existence with single shots. Colonel Nam, Jiwoo, a veteran of the final shadow battle, stepped forward. Her face bore burn scars from weapons that operated outside normal spacetime, and her left arm had been replaced with a cybernetic prosthetic that incorporated shadow fighting technology. "But we won," she said simply. "We drove them back beyond the galactic rim and established a permanent defense perimeter. For the past 50 years, we've maintained patrol fleets in the void between galaxies, watching for any sign of their return." The holographic display shifted again, showing the true scope of humanity's secret war. Massive space fortresses hung in the darkness between galaxies, their designs incorporating technology that seemed to blend advanced science with something approaching magic. These weren't just military installations. They were monuments to humanity's determination to protect a galaxy that didn't even know it needed protection. Captain Shin Yu-jin of Earth's Reconnaissance Division moved to the controls, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that managed surveillance networks spanning multiple galaxies. What she revealed next drained the color from every alien face in the chamber. "However, our deep space sensors are detecting new movement in the void," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of approaching doom. "The shadows are regrouping, and this time, they're not alone." The display showed formations moving through intergalactic space that defied imagination. Millions of shadow vessels arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly, their numbers so vast that they seemed to darken the space between galaxies. But worse than their numbers was what accompanied. To them, other shapes, other forms of darkness that suggested the shadows had found allies in their hunger for destruction. "They've learned from their defeats," Admiral Hyunwoo concluded, his voice carrying the certainty of someone who had studied these enemies for decades. "They're not just coming back. They're coming back stronger, smarter, and with reinforcements, from places we can't even imagine." The chamber fell into absolute silence as the full implications sank in. The galaxy's peaceful civilizations, their trade networks, their billions of worlds filled with life, all of it was under threat from enemies that existed beyond their worst nightmares. and the only thing standing between them and complete annihilation was a species they had dismissed as primitive, a race of warriors who had been fighting in the darkness for 3 centuries to protect neighbors who didn't even know they existed. The humans stood in the center of the chamber, their scarred uniforms and battle-hardened faces telling the story of wars fought in places too terrible for others to imagine. They had come not as conquerors or supplicants, but as guardians ready to defend a galaxy that was finally learning the price of peace. The shadows were coming, and humanity was the only force that had ever stood against them and survived. The question now was whether the galaxy would accept their protection, or whether pride and fear would doom them all to become food for creatures that fed on the very fabric of reality itself. Commander Park Sung-min had been staring at the same star, charts for 6 hours straight when the alarm started screaming. The monitoring station, Vigilant Watch, was humanity's most advanced early warning system, positioned at the edge of known space where the galaxy met the endless void beyond. For 3 days since the council meeting, everything had been quiet. Too quiet? The massive holographic display in the center of the command room suddenly erupted with red warning indicators. Park Sung-min's coffee mug shattered on the floor as he jumped to his feet, his hands flying across the control panels with practiced precision. "Contact control. This is Vigilant Watch," he spoke into his headset, his voice tight with the kind of tension that came from years of fighting an enemy that defied natural law. "We have multiple hyperspace breaches in the Kepler sector. This is not a drill." The sensor readings were unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of the usual, chaotic signatures that marked shadow incursions, these contacts were organized, methodical. They were dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation, like a military fleet, rather than the mindless swarm attacks humanity had grown used to fighting. "Sir, contact count is climbing rapidly," reported his sensor operator, Lieutenant Kim. Yuna! Her face was pale as she watched the numbers climb on her display. 50 contacts from 75, 100, and still coming through the breach. Park Sung-min felt ice form in his stomach. In all the Shadow Wars, they had never seen formations this large or this organized. Something had changed during the 50 years since the last major incursion. The Shadows had learned, adapted, evolved. On the bridge of the Thunder Strike, Admiral Hyun-woo was reviewing supply reports when the emergency communication came through. The moment he heard Park Sung-min's voice, 20 years of combat experience kicked in. This was the call every human military officer had been dreading since the end of the Shadow Wars. "How many ships?" he asked, his voice perfectly calm despite the implications of what he was hearing. 120 contacts confirmed, sir," Park Sung-min replied. "Configuration matches Shadow Vanguard formations, but they're more organized than anything in our tactical database. Admiral, they're not just attacking randomly. They're targeting specific systems." Lieutenant Park So-young pulled up the tactical display on the main screen, her fingers moving across holographic controls with the speed of someone who had trained for this moment her entire career. The strategic situation was immediately clear and absolutely terrifying. "Admiral, the Vorthak Third Fleet was conducting military exercises in the Kepler sector," she reported, her voice barely steady. 50 ships, including General Korath's flagship. They're directly in the path of the Shadow Advance." Hyun-woo closed his eyes for a moment, knowing what was about to happen. The Vorthak were brave warriors, but their weapons and tactics were designed for fighting other conventional military forces. Against the Shadows, they might as well be throwing rocks at a hurricane. "Get me General Korath immediately," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Vorthak flagship's bridge. General Korath's reptilian features were tense with confusion and growing fear. Behind him, his crew worked, frantically at their stations, their movements showing the kind of panic that came from facing something completely outside their experience. "Admiral, my ships are detecting contacts that shouldn't exist," Korath reported, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Our sensors can barely track them. They appear to be solid one moment and pure energy the next. What kind of weapon can do that?" "General, you need to withdraw your entire fleet immediately," Hyun-woo commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced these enemies before. Your weapons are completely useless against the shadows. Get your people out of there now. Korath's pride flared for a moment, his warrior instincts rebelling against the idea of retreat. I will not run from primitive alien contacts. The Vorthak Third Fleet has never retreated from any enemy. We will show these creatures the meaning of... The transmission cut to static in the middle of his sentence. On the tactical display, the 50 green dots representing Vorthak warships began winking out one by one, disappearing from the sensors. With the methodical precision of a predator eliminating prey, Major Yang Su-jin coordinated the human response from her battle station, her fingers dancing across controls that managed Earth's most advanced military systems. All Earth vessels, implement Battle Protocol 7 immediately. We have confirmed Shadow Vanguard forces in Kepler sector. This is a code black emergency. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Thunder Strike activated its hyperspace, drives alongside its sister ships, the Stormbreaker, Night's End, and Final Dawn. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human military engineering, their hulls bearing the scars of battles fought against enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. As they jumped into hyperspace, the human fleet moved with the coordination of a pack of wolves. These weren't just warships, they were the accumulated knowledge of 3 centuries of warfare against humanity's greatest enemy, each one a weapon specifically designed to fight creatures that consumed the very fabric of space-time. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler sector, the battle was already over. The space that had once contained 50 proud Vorthak warships was now filled with drifting debris and something far worse, shadow vessels gliding through the wreckage like sharks feeding on the remains of their prey. The shadow ships were nightmare versions of conventional spacecraft. Their hulls seemed to be made of crystallized darkness, surfaces that absorbed light and reflected nothing back. They moved with fluid grace that defied physics, their forms constantly shifting between solid matter and pure energy. Contact bearing, 27 Mark IV, reported Weapons Chief Kim Bo-ram, her voice steady despite the horror of what they were facing. Range 4,000 kilometers and closing fast. I'm reading 12 shadow vessels, all showing active feeding patterns. The shadows were consuming the debris from the destroyed Vorthak fleet, absorbing not just the metal and energy, but something more fundamental, the very existence of the ships and their crews. This was how they grew stronger, how they turned victory into power for their next attack. All ships open fire, Admiral Hyun-woo ordered. The human fleet unleashed weapons that had been specifically designed to fight enemies that shouldn't exist. Beams of coherent energy that existed partially outside normal space-time lanced across the void, each shot carrying enough power to destroy a small moon. But these weren't conventional weapons. They were reality shapers, devices that could force the shadows back into normal physics, where they could be hurt. The first shadow vessel struck by human fire didn't explode in the conventional sense. Instead, it screamed, a sound that came through the hull of every human ship, bypassing audio systems to resonate directly in the minds of the crew. It was the death cry of something that consumed reality itself, the sound of corrupted existence, being forced back into the natural order. Direct hits on multiple targets, reported Captain Lee Sul-gi from the bridge of the Stormbreaker. Shadow vessels are taking damage, but Admiral, there are hundreds more coming through the breach. This is just the beginning. Across the galaxy, emergency transmissions flooded the communication networks as Shadow Vanguard forces struck at unprepared civilizations. The Zephyrian home fleet, pride of their technological superiority, lasted exactly 17 minutes before being completely consumed. The Krelian defense grid, considered the most advanced fortification in known space, held for 34 minutes before being overwhelmed by enemies that could phase through their shields. Species after species reported the same terrible story, fleets disappearing without trace, worlds going dark, entire star systems simply ceasing to exist as the shadows fed on everything they contained. In the council chambers, High Chancellor Mordek's crystalline form flickered with barely contained terror as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Admiral Hyun-woo, you said you could protect us. Our entire civilization is under attack. From the Bridge of the Thunder, strike, Surrounded by displays showing human ships engaging shadow forces across 3 sectors simultaneously, Admiral Hyunwoo's image appeared before the assembled council. His face was grim but determined, carrying the weight of a species that had been fighting this war for centuries. "We will protect you," he said simply, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "But you need to follow our orders exactly. Your military forces are to withdraw to defensive positions around your core worlds. Do not engage the shadows directly under any circumstances. This is no longer your war. It's ours." The words hung in the air like a declaration of responsibility that no species should have to bear alone. But humanity had been bearing it for 300 years, and they were prepared to carry that burden for as long as necessary. The galaxies. Guardians had returned to active duty, and the real war was just beginning. The massive viewport of the rebuilt council chambers on New Altair showed a galaxy forever changed. Admiral Kim Hyun-woo stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the final evacuation transport disappear into hyperspace. 6 months had passed since the Shadow Vanguard first struck, and the scars of that war were visible everywhere. Entire star systems reduced to empty space, trade routes that would never be used again, and billions of lives lost to creatures that fed on existence itself. But against all odds, humanity had kept its promise. The galaxy still existed, and that was victory enough. The council chambers had been rebuilt from the ground up after shadow forces destroyed the original station. The new design was purely functional, no artistic flourishes or cultural displays, just reinforced walls and emergency systems designed to withstand attacks from enemies that could phase through normal matter. Every surface bore monitoring equipment that constantly scanned for dimensional breaches. Captain Jang Da-yoon stood before the assembled survivors, her xenobiology expertise having proved invaluable during the war. Her uniform bore new decorations, medals, created specifically to honor those who had fought against enemies that shouldn't exist. The assembled alien representatives listened to her with the kind of respect usually reserved for legends. "The Shadow main force has been repelled beyond the galactic rim," she reported, her voice carrying across the chamber with quiet authority. "Our combined human-alien defense grid is maintaining full operational status at 97%. Efficiency." The word combined was generous. While alien species had contributed everything they could, logistics support, manufacturing capacity, evacuation coordination, the actual fighting had been done almost entirely by human forces. Only humanity possessed weapons capable of actually damaging the shadows, and only human tactical doctrine had proved effective against enemies that could adapt to everything except pure, controlled chaos. General Nam Ji-woo, recently promoted from colonel after leading the successful defense of the Centauri cluster, managed the integration of alien forces into humanity's defense network. Her cybernetic arm had been upgraded with shadow fighting technology, making her one of the few beings in the galaxy who could interface directly with weapon systems designed to operate outside normal physics. "We've established permanent monitoring stations at every known breach point," she reported, calling up holographic displays that showed the galaxy's new defensive perimeter. "Early warning systems are operational across 47 sectors, with response times reduced to under 6 minutes for any dimensional incursion." Commander Oh Yeon-woo had spent the past 6 months working 18-hour days to adapt human technology for alien use. His engineering team had performed miracles, creating weapons systems that alien species could actually operate without years of specialized training. "We've managed to create defensive weapons suitable for council fleets," he explained, showing holographic schematics of the new hybrid technologies. "They won't match our primary weapons for effectiveness, but they can protect your worlds while our main forces engage the primary threats." The weapons were elegant compromises between human shadow fighting technology and alien manufacturing capabilities. They couldn't erase shadow vessels from existence like true human weapons, but they could disrupt shadow feeding patterns and force the creatures back into normal space where conventional weapons could at least slow them down. High Chancellor. Mordek approached Admiral Hyunwoo with movements that spoke of genuine reverence. The Altarian leader was one of only 12 council members who had survived the war, and his crystalline features bore new patterns that marked him as a veteran of battles beyond normal comprehension. "Admiral, the surviving council members have reached unanimous agreement," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that had required weeks of debate. "We wish to offer humanity full membership in the Galactic Council, with emergency powers over all military affairs and defense planning." It was an unprecedented offer, effective control over the military forces of dozens of species, with the authority to override any governmental decision that might affect galactic security. For any other species, it would have been an irresistible opportunity to become rulers of known space. Admiral Hyunwoo shook his head without hesitation. "We appreciate the offer, Chancellor, but we have a different role to play." He gestured toward the main display, which showed a real-time tactical overview of the galaxy. Dozens of human warships patrolled the outer rim, their dark hulls nearly invisible against the cosmic void. Each ship was a fortress designed to stand against enemies that existed partially outside reality, crewed by veterans who had learned to fight battles that would drive other species insane. "We'll remain as guardians," he explained, his voice carrying the certainty of someone who had found his species' true purpose. "Out there, in the darkness between galaxies where the real threats live, your species can rebuild, explore, discover new worlds, create new art, raise new generations. We'll make sure nothing comes through that shouldn't." The decision represented everything that made humanity unique in the galaxy. Other species sought power, territory, resources, glory. Humans had chosen to be protectors, standing eternal watch in places too terrible for others to face. Captain Park, so young, now commanding, her own vessel after proving herself during the defense of the Vega system, had taken over rim patrol operations. Her daily reports came through on encrypted channels, each one a small reminder that the universe was vast and full of horrors. Sector 7, clear of all anomalous activity. Her voice crackled through the communication system. Sector 12 showing minor dimensional fluctuations, but readings are within normal parameters for post-breach space. No shadow activity detected in any monitored region. The other council species had learned to sleep better, knowing that human ships stood watch in the darkness. Children across 100 worlds went to bed secure, in the knowledge that if monsters came from the void, humanity would be there to stop them. General Korath had become one of humanity's most vocal supporters, his warrior's pride replaced by the humility that came from seeing true strength in action. During a routine supply meeting, he pulled Admiral Hyunwoo aside for a conversation that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. "I thought we Vorthak were warriors," he admitted, his scarred features showing genuine respect. "We conquered worlds, we built empires, we feared nothing in the galaxy. But we were children playing with toys compared to what you face out there." Captain Thys of the Zephyrians had dedicated her entire research division to understanding human technology. But even their most advanced scientists struggled with concepts that seemed to blend physics with something approaching magic. "Your weapons operate on principles we're still trying to comprehend," she reported during a technology sharing session. "It's as if you've learned to fight reality itself, to impose order on chaos through pure force of will." 3 years passed, and the galaxy slowly healed from the wounds of the Shadow War. Trade routes reopened between surviving worlds, exploration missions ventured into uncharted sectors, and the various civilizations began to rebuild what they had lost. New cities rose from the ashes of destroyed worlds. New technologies emerged from the combination of human and alien knowledge, and new generations were born who would grow up in a universe protected by humanity's eternal vigilance. But everyone knew the truth now. In the deep void between galaxies, human warships maintained their watch against horrors that lurked in the spaces between stars. The UES Thunder Strike and her sister vessels had become legends whispered across 1,000 worlds, dark guardians, who stood between civilization and the nightmares that fed on reality itself. When young aliens asked their elders about the humans, they were told simple truths that carried profound meaning. They are the ones who fight the darkness so we can live in the light. And in that darkness, Admiral Kim Hyunwoo stood on his bridge, watching sensors that monitored threats beyond imagination. His hair had gone completely grey, his face lined with the weight of protecting an entire galaxy, but his eyes still burned with the determination that had carried humanity through 3 centuries of impossible war. Because humanity had chosen its role long ago, not as conquerors seeking dominion, not as explorers seeking knowledge, not as traders seeking profit, but as guardians who stood watch in the places too terrible for others to face. The galaxy no longer feared when Earth's warships appeared in their skies. Now they prayed for them. The end